Do you ever wonder if there are right answers when you talk to the police? Do you want to know how to protect yourself by having a better idea of what to say if the police ask you a question? If so, stay tuned. This is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear, and I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. My law firm's been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington state for more than 20 years. And we often get the question, should I talk to the police? What should I say to the police? Or even, hey, I told the police this, did I make a mistake? Well, I'm going to jump right into that in a second. First, if you find this video useful, please like and please subscribe. More people will get the help they need. There's not a lot of help out there. So I could go a lot of different directions in this video about, is there a right thing to say to the police? And so I'm going to basically use two different types of approaches. The first approach, I'm going to talk about some specific situations in what's maybe better to say or not say when you're pretty much are expected to say something to the police. And the other approach I'm going to take is, hey, you've been asked to come in for an interview. Maybe you're innocent, maybe you're not innocent, but you're thinking about talking to the police. And if you choose to talk to the police, then maybe what are some rules to follow that what I call the police talking rules versus polite society talking rules? Because the more polite you are when you talk to police in an interview, the more you're using general niceties, the harder it's going to be on you. So let's talk about the first approach I want to take to this video, which is situations where you pretty much are expected to at least say something to the police. And I think the most common situation in that would be a traffic stop. You're driving down the road. The worst case situation would be, hey, you're pulled over and you might have had something to drink and the officer suspects you of a DUI. Well, one of the first things that's going to happen is the officer walks up to your car. He's going to ask you to roll down the window. He or she might be on the driver's side or might be on the passenger side. And they might say, hey, do you know why I stopped you? And a lot of people might, try to be really straightforward with the officer and say, yeah, I was speeding, or yeah, I swerved, I look at my phone, something like that. And while that's a fair answer, it may not be the best answer, because the reality is you don't really know why the officer stopped you. And if you actually tell the officer, yeah, I was speeding, or yeah, I was swerving, well, that just clears a hurdle that the officer was going to need to clear later, which is basically probable cause or reasonable suspicion for the stop, right? Hey, the defendant admitted he or she was speeding, so I don't need to establish it now in my report. So a better answer and probably a more fair answer is, I don't know why you stopped me. Why did you stop me, officer? Because you really don't know. So not only is it a better answer, it's also a truthful answer, right? Because we're not in the officer's head. And if we were to move along further in a DUI type of investigation, an officer might ask you, hey, have you been drinking? And what's the most common response? Yeah, I've had a couple, right? Or yeah, I've had one. Those are the most common responses. Sometimes the answer is no, as we give that answer, even if it's pretty obvious we've been drinking. But I think while those answers may be truthful, a better answer might be something along the lines of, I don't want to answer that, or I want to assert my right to remain silent on that issue. That would be, a literal textbook correct answer in that situation. Now, you've got to be careful. You don't want to aggravate the officer. And so if you do choose to go the route of, I'm going to assert my right to not answer that, you do so in that case in a nice way, in a polite way. The officer may push you further. Well, I can smell alcohol, okay, but I don't have anything else to say, officer. And the reason why you might want to do that is you put the officer to a test at that point. An officer's going to have to make a decision about whether or not they have the ability to, proceed further in this investigation. An officer always has an ability to get you out of the car, but the officer, may or may not be reasonable to ask for a field sobriety test at that point. If an officer says, hey, would you like to do some voluntary field sobriety tests? I just want to see if you're okay to drive. You don't even have to answer that question. You could say, I'd rather not, or no thank you, or again, I'm going to assert my right to remain silent on that, or maybe you just don't say anything. But definitely, it's usually not into your advantage to do field tests if you've been drinking, because they're pretty hard to pass. But the bottom line is, if you've not admitted while you were pulled over, and you haven't said one way or another whether you were drinking, now the officer may or may not arrest you and take you in for a breath test, but your defense attorney has a lot better chance of undoing it if you haven't said things that sort of establish reasonable grounds for the officer to arrest you. You'd rather have it be the officer's word alone, not the officer and you teaming up against you, right? So, those are some situations where maybe what you feel like saying is not the right thing to say. Because let me tell you, the officer isn't there to help you. Right? We'd like to think officers are there to help you. I'm pretty pro-officer. I was a prosecutor for 7 years. They've got a hard job. But if we want to think about their job honestly, they're not out there giving gold stars to people that are obeying the law. They're looking for people not obeying the law, and it's my opinion they often come with a preconceived notion of what is going on, right? Especially if it's a certain time of night, they think everybody is drunk, right? If certain types of people from different ethnicities, they might have implicit or biases against and normally just think the worst automatically, right? So the officer isn't there to try to pat you on the back and say that a boy or that a girl. So the less you say, the better. Again, they're just people. They are powerful. They can be activated and upset by the way we say things. So do your best to remain calm. And in that situation, when you answer, you can answer politely, but hopefully you say little to nothing about what is going on. You're going to need to identify yourself. You're going to need to say who you are. You're likely need to show your license, those type of things. But investigatory questions like where are you coming from, where are you going, you don't have to answer those. Okay, so let's move on to the second situation that I want to cover in the video. And this is one that comes up a lot in our practice because we do a lot of high-level felony work and gross misdemeanor work where there's investigations, right? And many times we have innocent clients or clients that have a different story and their story equates to their innocence while the story of the person complaining equates to their guilt. And so, of course, the officer already has all the story from the complaining victim or witness, and they come in believing, hey, this person that I want to talk to, that you're representing, Lance, is guilty. But sometimes we do want to get our side out to the police officer because oftentimes the officer may just be writing up a report that a prosecutor is going to see later, right? So if the prosecutor only sees one side and not the other side, well, they're more likely to charge it, aren't they? However, it's dangerous because, again, in my opinion, officers come to situations, since they're normal people, with the preconceived notion of what happened. They've sat there and maybe developed an emotional attachment to the victim, right? These terrible things they've said happen, and maybe none of it's true, but that's not how they come into the interview. So if you decide to talk to a police officer, first of all, don't do it without an attorney, obviously. You may think I have nothing to hide. Why do I need an attorney? They're just going to think I'm guilty. So, a lot of people are in jail who thought that way. But if you're talking to an officer, I think the general rules of polite society don't apply. I think we have to go with officer rules, and I'm just making that up now as far as calling it officer rules. But when I say polite society, that doesn't mean we need to be mean to an officer. We don't need to curse them or be short with them, but we don't need to give an inch, right? Let's say you're being investigated for a theft at work, and let's say there's a place where money's kept, right? It's an accounting office, or it's a fast food place, and there's a safe or something in the back, and there's several people suspected. Well, if you go into an interview with an officer might say something along the lines of, well, what hours do you work? Well, I work such and such. And, there's times when you're alone with the money in the back, right? There's got to be times where that happens. And so the officer's trying to sort of put it politely, just to get you to say, yeah, there must be. And talking to a friend or someone else about things, we try to give, right? We try to come towards them so we can have a shared understanding, right? We don't want to just make this firm line on things with others if we want to sort of, soothe their ego if we have a different opinion. Well, in that type of case, we say, yeah, there's times when I was alone with it, and maybe it was just you walking through. If you go with that so easily, you're building the officer's case. So it's better to think about it more practically. Were you ever really alone with it, right? Is it just passing through? So the better answer is no. No, I wasn't alone with the money, because the officer doesn't know otherwise, right? And you can't lie to officers, but also, your version of the truth is the truth for you. So what we have to do is teach to answer in very black and white ways that are protective of yourself, right? If you're going to talk, well, isn't it true, Mr. Defendant, that this person you were mad at, you were really angry at them because of what they said to you at the bar, and isn't it true that that's why you assaulted them? Well, you wouldn't want to go, well, yeah, I was angry. I mean, were you angry? Or would also something accurate to say be something along the lines of, well, it was upsetting, but I wasn't really angry. I would never hit someone over something so stupid, right? So I want to encourage anybody who's talking to the officers, while we still have to be truthful, to be more firm in our no's to what the officers are asking, if it's fair to say no. It's scary to be talked to by a parental figure, right? An officer is an authority figure. It's like talking to a parent. It makes us into little kids. That's why you also don't want to do it alone. So if you're going to go into an officer interview, you can't just go and go, yeah, I'm going to be really fair and nice and chummy and all this, and I'm going to try to convince them of X, Y, or Z, and they're going to believe me. You got to be as strong as stone in your saying things that are truthful for you and in favor of you. You cannot give them an inch, because they will interpret it against you and they will take a mile. And in this case, when they take a mile, you might end up in jail. So just be careful. Don't get fooled that officers are on your side. The officers aren't bad people, but they have a job to do. And unfortunately, oftentimes that job is trying to make somebody guilty when they don't know if they're guilty or not, in my opinion. So I hope you find this video useful. If so, please like and please subscribe. And more importantly, if you are in some problems, you need some legal help, feel free to give my office a call. We've been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years. We'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.